Psychological Foundations of Learning and Development, Child and Adolescent, Unit 1, Developmental Needs of Learners and Implications for Practice. Introduction. This unit deals with concept of growth and development, stages of development, determinants of, dimensions of development in general, and relates these with the developmental profiles of the students and their implications for learning. The major domains of development we need to study as secondary school teachers are changes of the body and its different parts. This means physical development, the growth of the mind. This means cognitive development, improvement of relations with others. This means social development, changes in emotional control. This means emotional development, understanding and acceptance of moral values, i.e. moral development, and changes in identity. This means personality development. As high school teachers, we need to develop grasp of the salient features of these changes, how they affect students' learning, and how we can facilitate learning to occur in a better way. Objectives. Upon completion of this unit, the students shall understand concepts of growth and development, dimensions, stages, and determinants of development, understand major developmental changes, factors affecting these changes, explain the implications of these changes for classroom teaching and learning, appreciate the importance of developmental changes in structuring the teaching act. Use these changes as a foundation to design, plan, and conduct the teaching and learning act. Unit contents and subcontents. 1. Physical development. 2. Cognitive development. 3. Social development. 4. Gender development. 5. Moral development. The adolescent period. Short preview. Adolescent is a period of transition from childhood to early adulthood, starting at the approximately 10 to 12 years of age and ending at about 18 to 22 years of age. Adolescence begins with rapid physical changes, dramatic gains in height and weight, changes in body count, and the development of sexual characteristics such as enlargement of breast, development of pubic and facial hair, and deepening of the voice. At this point in development, the pursuit of independence and identity are prominent. Thought is more logical, abstract, and idealistic. More time is spent on outside of the family. Physical development. Activity 1.2. Brainstorming. What is physical development? One of the distinguishing developments experienced at the adolescent period is related to physical development. Physical development, as you might have seen in your previous courses, is a development related to the changes in height, weight, body muscles, and other body changes. The changes could be explained either quantitatively, like in terms of changes in weight kilograms, or qualitatively, such as the changes in the strengths of body muscles. However, compared to other developmental aspects, the physical development is easily measured with simple tools such as a scale or a tape measure. Other developmental dimensions are more difficult to quantify. During adolescent growth spurts, the arms and legs also lengthen, and eventually become proportional to the rest of their body. However, teens may suddenly feel awkward and uncoordinated during this time, because growth does not always occur at a perfectly proportional rate, and there seems to be differences in the physical development among the male and female children. 1.1 Differences in the physical developments male and female adolescents. Research evidenced that the body mass of boys greatly increased during adolescence due to the rising levels of male hormones, such as testosterone, that cause an increase in muscle mass. In general, boys' straight-lined, square bodies become broader at the shoulders and more tapered at the waist, forming the familiar triangular shape of adult males. Particularly, the arms and the legs of the body become strong and bulkier. However, this is not always true. Heredity, nutrition, and muscle-building exercise can influence muscular development of the children, which ultimately lead the differences in body development among male children. For example, adolescents that play sports, lift weights, or routinely work out in other ways are likely to gain muscle mass. What do you think is the consequences of the differences in physical development among the boys? Like what the male counterparts, teen girls continue to develop muscle mass, while also adding body fat. During adolescence, it is consistently confirmed that girls' percentage of body fat will increase relative to muscle mass. This additional fat is deposited in their body's midsection, hips, buttocks, and chest. Girls' straight-lined, square bodies become wider and broader at the hips, buttocks, and chest, forming the familiar hourglass shape of adult females. The emergence of such manifestations in the female body has many implications. Often, it is consistently confirmed that teen girls feel uncomfortable or upset during this growth phase because of the increase in body fat. Girls should be encouraged to view this change to their body composition in a positive light as yet another indication they are becoming young women. While girls may feel fat during this maturation process, it may be helpful for them to understand that some additional body fat is necessary for women to have healthy pregnancies and in order to nurse babies. 1.2 Some manifestations of physical developments in the adolescent period. 1.2.1 Improved motor skills. As adolescents continue to mature, they become better able to move their bodies with greater skill and precision. And the development of the motor skills could be either gross motor skills or fine motor skills. The difference between the gross and fine motor skills is that in the gross motor skills there is large muscle movements of the body, e.g. muscles used while running, whereas in the fine motor skills there is a development in the tiny and precise muscle movements, e.g. muscles used while keyboarding or texting. Relative to boys, adolescent girls make only modest gains in their gross and fine motor skills until approximately 14 years of age. After this point, they generally do not experience any additional improvement in their motor skills unless they are specifically training for a sport or hobby which requires these skills. In contrast to girls, the motor skills of adolescent boys continue to improve, particularly gross motor skills. Adolescent boys rapidly gain physical speed, jumping strength, throwing strength, and endurance throughout the entire period of adolescence, even into their early 20s. 1.2.2 Primary sexual characteristics. The development in the sexual characteristics is one of the physical developments observed in the adolescents, particularly the change in height, body composition, and motor skills. The sexual reproductive system triggers many changes during the transition from childhood to adulthood. Young teens develop both primary and secondary sexual characteristics that are brought about by hormonal changes. Primary sexual characteristics refer to the reproductive organs themselves, e.g., the ovaries and testes. Secondary sexual characteristics refer to other characteristic indicators of adult male and female bodies, e.g., body hair. The development of primary sexual characteristics indicates youth have become capable of adult reproductive functioning. This means the ability to make babies. The development of both primary and secondary sexual characteristics begins during late childhood and continues throughout early adolescence. However, it is important to remember that youth experience these changes at different rates and times. For more information about the biological and hormonal changes that trigger these changes, and for suggestions about guiding young teens through this process, please refer to the article on puberty in the Middle Childhood series. For females, the most significant primary sexual characteristic is the first menarche, or first menstrual period. The first menarche indicates girls have begun to ovulate, i.e., to release mature eggs that can become fertilized by male sperm through sexual intercourse. The average age for the first menstrual period is 12 years, but girls can reach menarche at any age from 10 to 15 years old and still be considered normal. For males, the primary sexual characteristics include an enlargement of the penis and testes, and the first sperm arch. This means the first ejaculation of mature sperm capable of fertilizing female eggs through sexual intercourse. The average age of first sperm arch is 13 years, but it can occur any time between the ages of 12 and 16 years. On average, the testes will begin to enlarge at about 11 years of age, but this growth can occur any time between 9 and 13 years. On average, the penis begins to enlarge around age 12, but this growth can begin at any age between 10 and 14 years. The penis reaches its adult size at about age 14, but this can occur any time between the ages 12 and 16. 1.2.3 Secondary sexual characteristics. Like primary sexual characteristics, secondary sexual characteristics are brought about by the hormonal changes associated with the maturing reproductive system and include changes in body hair and changes in voice quality. Young adolescents will notice hair growing in new places on their bodies, such as their underarms and groins. While this process began during late childhood, this hair continues to thicken and darken during the teen years. Teen guys will notice their facial hair continues to grow more quickly and more thickly, and they may notice hair growing on their chest and stomach. This hair may continue to grow thicker until middle or late adolescence. Teen guys will also notice their voices begin to deepen between ages 12 to 15 years. This happens as their vocal cords grow longer, and their larynxes, or voice boxes, grow larger. The enlarged voice organs cause deeper voice tones. Adolescent guys will notice their Adam's apples grows larger during this period. This is because the enlarged larynxes push out the piece of cartilage in front of the larynx. Everyone has this piece of cartilage, but it's not noticeable in females because of their smaller voice boxes. This change can be unnerving for many guys because at the beginning of this change, their voices may crack or unexpectedly squeak during speech. This can cause unwanted attention and can be embarrassing. Male adolescent voices can continue to gradually deepen well into later adolescence. 1.2.4 Perspiration. As mentioned, the development of primary and secondary sexual characteristics begins during puberty and is brought about by the increase of certain hormones. This hormonal increase triggers many other changes as well. For instance, most teens will notice that their perspiration becomes more odoriferous, which can be quite unpleasant. While most people believe that the perspiration itself is the cause of this unpleasant odor, it's actually bacteria feeding on the perspiration that create the unpleasant odor. Interestingly, perspiration rises from two different types of glands, the eccrine glands and the apocrine glands. When most people think of perspiration, they typically think of a hot summer day or a strenuous workout. This type of perspiration is caused by the body becoming too warm. To correct for this, the body begins to perspire to cool down. Perspiration coats the skin with moisture and creates a cooling effect. This enables the body to maintain a safe core body temperature approximately 98.6 degrees Fahrenheit. This type of perspiration is produced by the eccrine glands. These sweat glands are found all over the body and open directly onto the skin's surface. The sweat that is produced from these glands is composed of mostly water and salts. Bacteria don't grow very well in this type of sweat because salt inhibits the growth of bacteria. Therefore, the sweat that comes from these glands is odorless. Since this protective cooling function is essential regardless of size or age, both children and adults produce this type of odor-free perspiration. However, during puberty, teens also begin to perspire from the apocrine glands. Unlike the eccrine glands, which are found all over the body, these glands are found within the hair follicles, so there are more of these sweat glands in places like the scalp, underarms, and groin, where hair follicles are grouped more closely together. These glands become activated during emotional responses such as excitement, happiness, fear, worry, and anger. The sweat produced by the apocrine glands is milky in appearance and is loaded with many different substances that provide food for bacteria to grow. In addition to food, bacteria need a dark, moist climate in order to survive. Therefore, the underarms, groin, and scalp where hair is concentrated provide the ideal climate for the growth of bacteria. It is these bacteria that put off the offensive odor that people associate with perspiration. Daily bathing removes both the bacteria and its food source. Implications for teaching. What do you think are the implications of physical development of the adolescents to the teaching and learning? Because the rate of physical development is so varied during adolescence, it often becomes a source of difficulty and discomfort for youth, and there could be children whose physical development is delayed due to some reasons. And this is usually the source of frustrations for the children. Cognitive development. What do you think is cognitive development? Cognitive development, unlike the physical development, mainly emphasizes the development in thinking, reasoning, language and other cognitive processes of the human being. Particularly, the cognitive developmental approaches place a special emphasis on how individuals actively construct their thinking. They also focus heavily on how thinking changes from one point in development to another. There are many theoreticians that explain the cognitive development of human beings. Jean Piaget is amongst others. Therefore, the section below discusses the stages of cognitive development of the adolescent period. 1.3 Jean Piaget stages of cognitive development. Piaget identified 5 characteristic indicators of adolescent cognitive development. These are 1. Formal operations, 2. Hypothetico-deductive reasoning, 3. Propositional thought, 4. The imaginary audience, and 5. The personal fable. Therefore, the section below goes through these stages and ultimately is done to see the implications of these stages into teaching learning processes. 1.3.1 Formal operations. This stage is shortly termed as the what-if. According to Piaget, it is used to describe the mental ability to imagine a hypothetical situation and to be able to determine a likely outcome without needing to actually observe or enact the scenario. For instance, suppose a 70 or 10-year-old child is asked, "What if there was a hungry dog in the kitchen and mother dropped a hot dog on the floor?" What do you think would happen? Most children at this age will correctly guess that the dog ate the hot dog, particularly if they have any experience with dogs. Piaget called this type of mental operation a concrete operation because the mental operation represents a tangible, concrete circumstance that the child can easily imagine since it is anchored to things that can be seen and touched in the real world. It is concrete. According to Piaget, the adolescent years are remarkable because youth move beyond the limitations of concrete mental operations and develop the ability to think in a more abstract manner. Piaget used the term formal operations to describe this new ability. Formal operations refer to the ability to perform mental operations with abstract, intangible concepts such as justice or poverty, and to be able to estimate or describe the effect of these intangible concepts. 1.3.2 Hypothetico-deductive reasoning and propositional thought. In addition to the ability to perform abstract mental operations, teens become more scientific and logical in the way they approach problems. Piaget called this methodical scientific approach to problem-solving hypothetico-deductive reasoning. Youth can now consider a problem or situation and can identify the many variables that may influence or affect the outcome. They can also estimate the most likely outcome if one or more variables are changed or manipulated. This ability has very practical applications because it enables youth to select the most logical or sensible solution to a problem. To illustrate the value of hypothetico-deductive reasoning, consider the following example. A teenage boy, Aaron, decided he'd like to surprise his mom and bake her some cookies. Unfortunately, the first batch didn't turn out so well. The cookies were burnt. In order to solve this problem, Aaron will mentally review the ingredients he used and the steps he took to bake the cookies. Aaron will consider the variables that typically cause burnt cookies, such as omitting a key ingredient, an improper oven temperature, or leaving the cookies in the oven too long. Next, Aaron will imagine changing each individual variable in order to determine the most likely cause of the burnt cookies, and he will subsequently decide what he needs to do differently. For instance, Aaron may decide that the most likely cause of the burnt cookies was that he left them in the oven too long. So, for the next batch of cookies, Aaron will set the timer for a shorter period of time. After the second batch is finished, he will then evaluate if this solved the problem or whether he needs to change a different variable. However, if Aaron's younger brother James were to try and solve the burnt cookie problem, James would try to change several variables all at once by adding more milk, changing the baking time, and changing the oven temperature. This is because younger children cannot think about possible solutions to the problem without trying out the solutions, and younger children do not know how to solve problems in a logical and methodical manner by changing one variable at a time. 1.3.3 The imaginary audience and the personal fable. Not only do adolescents become more scientific and logical, but they also become better students of observation and interpretation. By observing other people's behavior, expressions, comments, and appearance, they can interpret this information and make reasonable guesses about what another person may be thinking, wanting, needing, or feeling. Unfortunately, these new cognitive abilities appear at the same time that younger adolescents are struggling with insecurities about their changing appearance, changing identity, and changing life experiences. All of these factors combine to create what Piaget called the imaginary audience. Teens may mistakenly believe that everyone around them is watching and judging them, scrutinizing their every move, and can become painfully self-conscious as a result. The concept of an imaginary audience helps parents to understand why their teenagers spend eons in front of the bathroom mirror just to run to the store for a short task, or become incredibly embarrassed over a seemingly minor mistake. Therefore, the imaginary audience provides an example of the interrelationship between cognitive, emotional, and social development. While the ability to use abstract thought and keen observational skills enables youth to become more attuned to others and more sensitive to people's needs, it can also lead to some new social and emotional difficulties when youth use their new cognitive abilities to compare themselves to others. Youth may feel exceptionally unique and different from other people, including their own peers. Piaget called this the personal fable. Many teens believe they have unique abilities, or conversely, unique problems, different from anyone else in the world. Some youth feel as though they are better, smarter, or stronger than others. This personal fable can lead to some devastating consequences, because these youth may take dangerous risks when they overestimate their abilities and believe they can handle it, or mistakenly believe they're supreme and that bad things cannot happen to them. This is why it is important for adult caregivers to continue to monitor youth's behavior, choices, and decisions. Conversely, other youth may feel as though they are dumber, weaker, and inferior to others. This kind of personal fable can lead to feelings of sadness, frustration, and loneliness. If these negative thoughts and feelings continue to strengthen, youth can become depressed or hopeless, which can lead to other dangerous behaviors such as drug use, unsafe sexual activity, or even suicide. Once again, these youth need their caregivers' love, guidance, and support to help them through these difficult circumstances. More specific information about emotional development can be found later in this article. From birth onward, the human brain continues to develop and mature. For adolescents, the amount of information they can process continues to increase, but the rate of increase is not as great as it once was during the middle childhood years. Likewise, their overall fund of information continues to build. Memorization capabilities further expand. Youth can now recall a large amount of detailed information such as lengthy, complicated, driving directions. Likewise, they can remember and apply patterns or formulas such as when solving a complex calculus problem. Youth also use sophisticated memorization strategies such as mnemonics to remember dates, e.g., Columbus sailed the ocean blue in 1492, or a musical tune or rhyme to help them to remember lengthy lists, e.g., singing the names of 50 states. Furthermore, as youth's capacity for memorization increases, the brain develops more efficient methods of organizing information, allowing for more rapid and accurate information storage and subsequent retrieval. This enables youth to recall information more easily and to apply the information in useful ways. Piaget and education. What are some applications of Piaget cognitive development to education? Indeed, Piaget was not an educator, but has contributed many works that enhance the development of education. Therefore, this section will try to elucidate some of the applications of the cognitive development to teaching and learning. Take a constructivist approach. Piaget believed that children learn more when they are active and seek solutions for themselves. He opposed teaching methods that treat children as passive receptors. Instead, students learn better by discovering, reflecting on them, discussing on them, rather than blindly imitating the teacher or doing things by rote. Facilitate rather than direct learning. Effective teachers design situations that allow students to learn by doing. These situations promote students' thinking and discovery. Turn the classroom into a setting of explorations and discovery. Moral development. Moral development is another perspective used to describe human development. Accordingly, it has been the interest of psychologists and educationists. And, although there are many scholars interested on the area, it seems that Lawrence Kohlberg and Jean Piaget are the prominent ones. Lawrence Kohlberg has modified and expanded Jean Piaget's work to form a theory that explained the development of moral reasoning. Jean Piaget after making an extensive study on children aged from 4 to 12, concluded that children go through two distinct stages of moral development. These include, from 4 to 7 years of age, children display heteronymous morality, the first stage of moral development in Piaget's theory. Children think of justices and rules as unchangeable properties of the world, removed from the control of the people. From 7 to 10 years age, children are in transition, showing some features of the first stage of moral reasoning, and some features of the first stage of moral reasoning, and some stages of the second stage. From about 10 years age and older, children show autonomous morality, the second stage of moral development. They become aware that rules and laws are created by people, and in judging an action, they consider the actor's intentions as well as the consequences. Lawrence Kohlheber, against of the stages mentioned by the Jean Piaget, come to outline 6 stages of moral development. Kohlberg extended Piaget's theory, proposing that moral development is a continual process that occurs throughout the lifespan. In his stages of moral development, Kohlberg states that human beings progress from a pre-conventional level of moral development in which they refer to rules imposed by others to a post-conventional level of moral development in which they refer to rules imposed from within them. Focus. The Heinz Dilemma. Kohlberg based his theory upon research and interviews with groups of young children. A series of moral dilemmas were presented to these participants, and they were also interviewed to determine the reasoning behind their judgments of each scenario. The following is one example of the dilemmas Kohlberg presented. Heinz steals the drug. In Europe, a woman was near death from a special kind of cancer. There was one drug that the doctors thought might save her. It was a form of radium that a druggist in the same town had recently discovered. The drug was expensive to make, but the druggist was charging 10 times what the drug cost him to make. He paid $200 for the radium and charged $2,000 for a small dose of the drug. The sick woman's husband, Heinz, went to everyone he knew to borrow the money, but he could only get together about $1,000, which is half of what it cost. He told the druggist that his wife was dying and asked him to sell it cheaper or let him pay later, but the druggist said no. I discovered the drug and I'm going to make money from it. So Heinz got desperate and broke into the man's store to steal the drug for his wife. Should the husband have done that? Kohlberg, 1963. Kohlberg was not interested so much in the answer to the question of whether Heinz was wrong or right, but in the reasoning for each participant's decision. The responses were then classified into various stages of reasoning in his theory of moral development. 1. Pre-conventional morality. Stage 1. Obedience and punishment. The earliest stage of moral development is especially common in young children, but adults are also capable of expressing this type of reasoning. At this stage, children see rules as fixed and absolute. Obeying the rules is important because it is a means to avoid punishment. Stage 2. Individualism and exchange. At this stage of moral development, children account for individual points of view and judge actions based on how they serve individual needs. In the Heinz Dilemma, Children argued that the best course of action was the choice that best served Heinz's needs. Reciprocity is possible at this point in moral development, but only if it serves one's own interests. Level 2. Conventional morality. Stage 3. Interpersonal relationships, often referred to as the good boy, good girl orientation. This stage of moral development is focused on living up to social expectations and roles. There is an emphasis on conformity, being nice, and consideration of how choices influence relationships. Stage 4. Maintaining social order. At this stage of moral development, people begin to consider society as a whole when making judgments. The focus is on maintaining law and order by following the rules, doing one's duty and respecting authority. Level 3. Post-conventional morality. Stage 5. Social contract and individual rights. At this stage, people begin to account for the differing values, opinions and beliefs of other people. Rules of law are important for maintaining a society, but members of the society should agree upon these standards. Stage 6. Universal principles. Kohlberg's final level of moral reasoning is based upon universal ethical principles and abstract reasoning. At this stage, people follow these internalized principles of justice, even if they conflict with laws and rules. Identification with role models that affects moral development of adolescence. 1. The first positive role model that any child should have is a parent. Nevertheless, many parents fail to realize the value of modeling positive behavior to their children. They may try to instill certain standards of behavior in their children, but children are more likely to imitate the behavior they observe in a parent than to listen to any regulations that a parent hopes to impose. As a child grows into adolescence, his role models may be as diverse as musicians, friends, or even politicians. While his choice of role models may appear to be reckless or misguided, he is likely to seek role models who demonstrate behavior that is consistent with the types of behavior modeled by his parents or caregivers. Peer pressure. 2. Peer pressure is often considered to be a negative force in the life of a teen. Indeed, most teens will not choose to engage in negative behaviors such as smoking or premarital sex, unless coaxed to do so by her peers. Still, peer pressure often exerts a positive influence on the life of a teen. Often, teens will provide support to one another in times of stress. For example, if a teen is considering committing suicide, her friends will usually be the first to tell her that life is worth living. Criticisms of Kohlberg's theory of moral development. Does moral reasoning necessarily lead to moral behavior? Kohlberg's theory is concerned with moral thinking, but there is a big difference between knowing what we ought to do versus our actual actions. Is justice the only aspect of moral reasoning we should consider? Critics have pointed out that Kohlberg's theory of moral development overemphasizes the concept as justice when making moral choices. Factors such as compassion, caring, and other interpersonal feelings may play an important part in moral reasoning. Does Kohlberg's theory overemphasize Western philosophy? Individualistic cultures emphasize personal rights, While collectivist cultures stress the importance of society and community, Eastern cultures may have different moral outlooks that Kohlberg's theory does not account for. Gender development. Some basic concepts. 1. Gender stereotyping are general impressions and beliefs about females and males. For example, men are powerful, women are weak. Men are good at mechanics, women are good nurses. 2. Masculinity and femininity. Masculinity is a set of qualities, characteristics or roles generally considered typical of or appropriate to a man, whereas femininity is a set of qualities, characteristics or roles generally considered typical of or appropriate to a female/woman. Early adolescence is another transitional point that seems to be especially important in gender development. Young adolescents have to cope with the enormous changes of puberty. These changes are intensified by their expanding cognitive abilities, which make them acutely aware of how they appear to others. Relations with others change extensively as dating relationships begin and sexuality experienced. As female and male experiences the physical and social changes of early adolescence, they must come to terms with new definitions of their gender roles. During the early adolescence, individuals develop the adult physical aspects of sex,